Hello, Uggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another issue of the Commentariat. Today is the 10th of May, 2023, and we're going to start looking at comments in the order they came in, most recent first, and kind of work our way back for a little while. All right, this first contact comes from Craig B, KC1SXF, says, "Thank you, please keep it up." And it's on an ancient video, azimuthal maps, getting and using, still perfectly valid, though, information. James Crutchfield here says, watching you do this reminds me of my first day as an electronics tech at 3M. That's Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3M. 40 years ago. You've not made any goofs. I didn't do that first month. I guess that's why they call this a hobby. It's good to get young folk in this kind of project so they can learn this stuff. The big goof that you may have noticed in there is that the first time I put in the SO239 connector, I put it in backwards, but I did fix that. Richard Bergen says it's spelled computer. Yes, and this says computor. I'll just bring this over here so you can see it. It is spelled computer, and I shall mention that to my assistant. He's a senior in high school. I don't get it. Or a junior. I think he's a junior. This is from Glenn Martin. Thanks, Dave. Colin and VK. Dave, I don't think your spell checker is working. Yeah, this is the computer thing again. 1RST. Worst was, I don't know. Keeping your computer speakers lined up. This is about a 796 using fabric softener and ham radio. It says bugs on a car grill come off when using used dryer sheets while washing the car's front end. I have to try that. What mixed toroid is used in this kit and how many are stacked together? There's just one, and I don't know. I'm not sure they say. But there are just 2 or 3 mixes that are used in ham radio, and I need to learn more about that. So I'll take a look at that. Sorry to say that 73 Antennas does not appear to be in business. After repeated attempts via their website, I have not been able to raise them by email, so I must assume they're no longer taking orders. Does anyone know otherwise? I just got an email from Constantine, who's the principal behind it, wanting me to be his U.S. distributor. I can't do that because I just don't have the wherewithal to do that. You need to be an exporter-importer kind of thing, and I don't know, I'll have to suggest to him he try DX Engineering or something like that. But that was quite recent. It could be since it's middle of winter down there, or getting into winter, fall. He's... I don't know, maybe he's on vacation or something. I've not had trouble getting hold of him. Try again. He's had import-export problems with China. His equipment he has made in China, then shipped to him. And then he ships in bulk to the U.S. where it is distributed from somewhere. I'm not sure where. I really liked his antenna. He also has a new end-fed half-wave antenna. JW4ZXT says 80-meter Moxons work well. I have heard of Moxons, although I've never built one. They're an old, maybe I should say mature antenna design, so you can take a look at that and see what you think of them. Lots of people for a lot of years used the Moxons. They had a vogue in the 60s and 70s, I think. But you can certainly do that. This is about a video here where somebody wants to modify the 40-meter line on a cobweb to also include 80. And the answer is yes, you can do that. Although getting your lengths right is going to take quite a bit of work to decide what the loading needs to be in there. And you will lose bandwidth on 40 meters. Right now, the cobwebs that have 40 meters also, well, they cover the whole 40 meter band. If you were to make it a 40-80 winding, it would, loop, it would not cover the whole band. Okay. Here's from Do I Need a Ballon? I have a half-wave end-fed vertical 427 meters, CB. On the analyzer, the SWR is no more than 1 to 3 throughout the band. Fine. Problem is when I use a linear amp at low power around 100 watts, SWR is below 1.5, but on the high of around 150 watts, the SWR is only resonant 10 channels in the middle of the band. Well, the problem clearly is heating. However, I would note for your attention here that the maximum power allowed on 11 meters, 27 megahertz, is 4 watts for AM and 12 watts for sideband. So I'm not going to offer you any assistance to exceed that. Okay, Glenn Martin says, thank you, Dave. So half wave is 132 feet for 80 meters. Yes, that would be 33 feet on the side. Oh, if you're going to, yeah, you could loop that, put a space between the two ends. Yeah, that would be right. It's going to point straight up. So if you do this, you're building an NVIS antenna. If you feed it with ladder line, it's possible you may be able to use it on other bands with a wide range tuner. But you can give it a try if you've got other antennas for other bands. A lot of hams do not have the space to put up an 80-meter dipole or anything like it. 40 meters at 66 feet is long enough. Okay, Roger LaFrance. While a horizontal loop is 3 dB less than a bidirectional half-wave dipole, it is omnidirectional. Yes, as are horizontal Vs or Us. The Vs are still slightly directional. I've done some modeling of them, and they, as you bring the ends down, you can, it kind of broadens or reduces the directionality, but the directionality is still slightly there. For 80 and 160, a remote antenna tuner and as much wire as you can deploy is a simple solution if you don't have space. That is true. You need to use an antenna tuner that's remote, a remote antenna tuner, and you need to get it up high in the air as you can, as much wire as you can. Now, technically, a long wire antenna is, several wavelengths long, a minimum 2 to 3 wavelengths long. But that does not mean that you cannot tune up a shorter piece of wire. You can. The Navy did some tests and found out that an 8-foot whip was really kind of fine, as long as the tuner is right at the base of it. Because the losses in such an antenna occur in the transmission line. Now, you will get some losses in the tuner, but nothing like you will get on the transmission line. So put the tuner right at the start of the antenna. All the 3 major Japanese manufacturers make these, as does IDG. I think it's IDG. Where's my latest issue of QST? I'll have to look that up. But LDG. Yeah, they make remote tuners also. It's nice to use the kind of tuner that you can control right through the coax, although you need to make sure that your lightning arrestor will allow DC to pass through. Some of them do not. The Polyphaser and the Morgans do not normally, unless you order a special model. The Alpha Delta lightning arrestors do allow DC to pass through. And yes, you do need a lightning arrestor. Okay, David AC 3HT, and I just got your entry today for the drawing. I haven't figured out what the drawing is yet. I've got to do that. You know what I think it should be? This is something I never use. Sorry if it's got my call sign on there. You can fix that, I'm sure. This is a hotspot that works. Okay, and we'll make this the drawing for May. I've already gotten some inputs for that, but get those cards and letters coming. And this is a nice little hotspot made by Next Gen. I have heard rumors they're not still doing it, but I cannot verify that is true. One moment. Had to turn on the AC. It's 65 outside. Summer, or at least spring, has arrived. Not necessarily wholeheartedly, because we still get unusual weather in May. I have seen it freeze. May 15th is supposed to be the last date for freeze. You're not supposed to get any overnight freezes past May 15th. That's baloney. Okay. Let's see. A cobweb hybrid to include 80 meters, so why not take an end-fed antenna? Then you will get rid of all those wires and it will be easier to tune, and you can get coverage 80, 40 to 10 on the classical ham bands. 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10. Sometimes they'll tune up okay on 17 and 12, but probably not 30. If you're a CW guy or you like to do FT8, 30 is an important band for you. So, but yes, you can do that. Like I said, there are many different antenna ideas, and the reason that there are so many antenna ideas is because no one is ever satisfied with the performance of their antenna, and there's no one best antenna for all uses. I tend to deal here on this channel with verticals and dipoles because I'm not talking to the fabulous DX contesters who are putting up step-IR giant Yagis, because those people already know anything I have to say. So anyway, I've been working with that. But yes, the end-fed antenna, I have the ARRL one up right now, set for 80 meters, actually 75. Well, technically 80, but it's the phone portion of the band. And I haven't used it yet. The capacitor is 3 kilovolts, but the leads on that thing are so tiny that I'm just afraid that putting 100 watts through it's going to vaporize it. So that is something that's going to be upcoming, is trying that on 80 meters and seeing how well it does. If I pop it on 40, well, it just reverts to a 40 meter antenna, and it should be fine. Okay, Norm and Sue B, thanks for the video on the hybrid. And Blue Scam 1 says, thank you for the explanation. This is on Do I Need a Ballon, which is video 739. Where to find my training videos? He says, what a shame. We'll skip to the chase here. The chase here is he does not want to join the ARRL. Okay, we live in an age of inflation, and even the league is talking about raising its dues. But $49 a year plus $2 or $3 a year extra for a spouse or somebody else who's a ham. And if there is a ham in a household where he's the only ham and he's under the age of 18, he can get in for a much, much lower price. I think might even be free for young hams whose parents are not hams, or no other adult in the household is a ham. Okay, $52, $49, plus the 60 some odd cents for the stamp, or you can do it online, which everybody does these days to avoid paying 66 cents for stamp. $49. If you take your significant other out to dinner at a nice restaurant, you're going to pay more than that, as much as double that. If you have a family of 5 trying to go to McDonald's, you're going to come close to that. This is the equivalent. Well, think about it. It's probably about what you pay for your internet service every month. I've got Starlink, so I pay more than that. I also have not yet given up on the local one. I've now had 3 live stream episodes in a row where Starlink did fine. After the 4th, I think I'm going to cut the switch over permanently to Starlink. Starlink uplink isn't all that good. Usually we've been doing video uplinks on the local internet. But my internet, well, it's a $60 plan a month, whereas the league costs you $50 a year. Now, here's what you get for your membership. I think it's worth it just for the magazine, QST, but you also have access online to On the Air, which is a magazine for technicians and those working on their general, and the Experimenters magazine, QEX, and which is the very technical journal. And then there is the contest one? I think so, but the National Contest Journal. You have access to all 4 of those online, and you can pick either QST or On the Air to be sent to you. Second, it has a technical information service that you can write to and expect an answer back from. They do have a station where they do code practice on the air. They have a nationwide network to support down to the local level at the various ARRL, not sections, but well, maybe they are sections. Okay, the local divisions, and I get those 2 words mixed up. The thing is, they also lobby Congress on behalf of ham radio, and they've been successful at that. For example, when the FCC proposed a $50 fee to do basically anything on their website, the league got them to cut it at least to $35. So it's $35 every 10 years you have to pay to renew, or $3.50 a year. So they saved you $15 on that. So, I mean, the bottom line is the league does a lot of things. Now, I fully recognize that there is a whole community of hams out there that hates the ARRL's guts. A lot of that is a leftover from the so-called incentive licensing fiasco of the 1960s. The ARRL has said sorry 1,000 times for that. It said it will never again make a proposal that could take away privileges from some group of hams. So, you know, it is really worth joining the league. And the technician videos are available on YouTube, on the league's YouTube web, normal YouTube site. And then the general and extra videos are available behind the league firewall when you go to learn.arrl.org. You sign in with your ARRL credentials, your call sign-in and your password, And then you have access not only to that, but many, many other training videos made specifically by various hams for ham radio. So the training videos they have for licensing are mine, and I keep them up. This year we're going to update the generals because there's a new general book coming out on July 1st. Well, the book is being worked on, of course, but it will be effective July 1st. So anyway, they are available. So Andrew Wood, hey, while I'm at it, are big oak trees in the vicinity going to affect my antenna? Some are not more than 15 to 20 feet. The answer is probably not. There was an article in QST 2 or 3 years back where somebody actually did some measurements on how much trees affected antennas. It turns out not terribly. So, I mean, a dB or so. Andrew Wood, is this? Yeah, that's the same one there. Andrew Wood said, "Hi Dave, just came across your channel and find it incredibly helpful, so thank you." You're welcome. I was originally thinking of stacking an omnidirectional on the same mast above a beam. I was thinking of a Mako UAD beam-based station CB antenna first. And then stacking another one on the same antenna with maybe 10 feet of separation. I am really not good at answering CB questions. There's a whole different set of manufacturers who make things for CB. And so these names don't mean anything to me. But if you're going to have a beam on your 11 meters, a vertical becomes superfluous. So you don't need to do that. Otherwise, I can't answer much on the CB. Okay, Mike Bavoso says, very informative. I made a loop antenna for this purpose by going to the craft store and buying one of those green styrofoam reef molds. They come in various sizes and diameters. Well, good. I'm glad that is working for you. He's looking for a source of noise. And you can use the loop antenna to find it because loops have a very sharp null. And you find the null in there, and it's the null that points in the direction of the source. Now, that doesn't mean walk directly to it. It means walk over here at an angle and take another reading, and then that reading might come across here where the two cross is approximately where the RFI is coming from. This is the same technique that you use for fox hunting, which is hidden transmitter hunting, which is quite a social gathering for a lot of people. Okay, if my random wire antenna is grounded, do I need a counterpoise? Conversely, if I have a counterpoise, do I need a ground? Yes, you always need a ground. And is it okay to have both a counterpoise and a ground? Yes. Random wire antennas, normally we do not ground them at the other end. There are some kinds of antennas like the beverage that are not very high off the ground. They're quite long. 2 to 3 wavelengths on 160 meters is a very long antenna. And they are at the far end terminated in their characteristic impedance. This makes them see one way, which is down the direction of that. Otherwise, they see in both directions. Same trick works for rhombics. Okay, if your random wire antenna is grounded, normally you'd have it grounded through the balun or the your antenna tuner or something like that. They do make lightning arresters for random wire antennas. I know a user who just uses a spark plug and puts it out. He's got a piece of metal that he's got the threads drilled in, puts the spark plug into it, connects the random wire to the top, which screws off, by the way. And then he's got this grounded, so if there is a need for an arc to form, it'll form across that spark plug gap and take it to ground. although the voltage across the spark gap can be, 20, 30 volts. So the difference between a counterpoise and a ground is resistive. Counterpoise is capacitive. It's a reactive device. You push energy into it, it pushes it back. Okay? Whereas if you have a ground, you push energy into it and bye-bye energy, it's gone. So counterpoise, technically a set of radials is a counterpoise. But normally at the center, where you have the vertical coming out of the ground, you'll take the inner wire to the part that goes up, the outer wire to the radials, and then you drive a ground rod there and connect it to the radials. That way the counterpoise can act as a counterpoise, capacitive, and you've got the ground there, so you're grounded for all the good things that grounding do for you, and so on. So it depends. If your random wire is got an arrestor on it, you may not need a counterpoise. Normally a random wire would come to an antenna tuner. Even my old MFJ 901B, which is my first tuner, has a link on the back for a random wire antenna. But you get these remote tuners that you can tune remotely, get them out of the shack, get them well grounded, and then run your long wire off of that, or random wire off of that, and then you tune it from in the shack using the controls for that tuner. If you buy the Yaesu or so on, you can often link them right to the radio. There's an RS-232 on the back of the ICOM 7300 that allows you to connect that tuner directly there. So it'll remember the frequencies and what the settings were and stuff like that. It's really very handy because you can do almost instant tuning, and you can do it on all bands. Now, is a random wire directional? Yes, it is a little bit directional. Now, if you put the tuner at the end of the random wire, then you put a ground rod right there, ground that tuner really well to that. The tuner, in the way it works, you want to put a lightning arrestor in there somewhere too. Okay, you probably do that where the line comes into the shack, where the coax from the tuner comes into the shack. And whether the tuner will give you a DC ground or not, I don't know. But it's all reactive elements in there. So, the only heating in the tuner is if there's so much current that it causes the coils to heat up, which is unusual for something like that. So, yeah, that's how I'd do that. So, okay, now this is making the end-fed half wave. The antenna lengthened to 80 meters may also give you coverage of the 30, 17, and 12. I'll have to try those. I don't know. I haven't tried that. It will have additional resonant points at 10.5, 17.5, 24.5, and those may be close enough to provide an acceptable SWR. I'd like to see tests on this. So would I. I'll have to do that before I risk blowing that capacitor out, because the antenna analyzer puts out so little current that it's not going to break that capacitor. So yeah, let's give that a try and see how that works. It's set up right now. It's easy enough to do. And so Shirley, thank you for the suggestion. Bob Carnaroli says, I got my 40 to 10 end-fed half wave to work on 80 meters with the 100 microhenry extension. It was a piece of 2-inch PVC with 100 or so winds and then a few feet added to that. I'd have to check the exact values, but it wasn't very hard and didn't add more than 6 feet. Well, there you go. Another way to do it. Make sure that it does not affect the tuning on the other bands. That's one of the problems with a standard end-fed half-wave. You have only one thing you can tune. That's the length. And it will affect all bands at once. So you generally have to tune an 80 through 10 half-wave for the very low part of 80 meters in order to get it to cover all of the other bands. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and this is another way of adding an antenna. You've loaded a piece of wire so that it will work on 80. 100 turns, okay, that's quite a few, so there's a lot of inductance there. And I think you'd be doing pretty well. Mic R, effective of Ballon, the 915 choke Ballon on 304, video 304. It's as funniest looking Ballon I've ever seen. Looks like an Unknown to me. It is a Ballon in its function. Okay, it's not a transformer. It's a piece of coax shoved in there that's got a gazillion ferrite beads around it. Okay, so you've got unbalanced coming in, you've got balanced at the antenna, and what happens with the balance is you're using coax. You end up with a lot of energy on the outside shield, which is not supposed to be there. And that will hit all of those beads and see that as a very high impedance. So that whatever is on the outside will go through and will not affect anything. Now, another place you can put that device is just before where it comes into the radio. Okay, I don't have trouble with RF in the shack with my present setup, which I've gone to a lot of trouble to ground. And I don't have any RF in the shack, except my computer speakers. When I work on 80 meters, my computer speakers come alive. It's just easy to shut them off. By the way, that thing would work as an one-to-one. It's a one-to-one Ballon. If you wanted to keep, something, I'm not sure why you would use it as an unknown, but you probably could. Okay, we're back to the ARRL 40 through 10 from Bob Smith. I'm using an 84-foot end-fed RW, end-fed half-wave, with a 9-to-1 unknown. Okay. Yeah, I know when these first started becoming popular, people were using 9-to-1 unknowns, which only gets you up to 450 ohms. And the end of the antenna is at a much higher impedance. That's why people use the 49-to-1, which gets you up to, 2450 ohms? Something like that. From 15 megahertz to 54, it peaks at 2.4 SWR, just below and above the full 80-75 band, about 2.2 in the middle. I'm surprised it's so broadband. It's below 160, and above the 2.4 peak at 4.4 megahertz all the way to 54. I'm getting these numbers from a screenshot of an NOVNA saver sweep, so some of the numbers aren't exact. My antenna tuner has no problem anywhere. I think the internal tuner could probably handle all of it, but I haven't tried. Did I just get lucky with the placement counterpoison loops through a toroid just before the lightning? I'm just surprised that it has such a low SWR over such a wide range. I'd be very interested in a picture of your balance setup in a diagram, how you wound it and stuff like that. And I would be very interested in a screenshot, that screenshot that you have. Send them to Ask Dave, all one word, at arrl.org. I look forward to seeing them. Okay, David AC3HT added $2 to his question. Thank you. And he said he appreciates the nice update. Now this is CPBBG5, BCBBG5, okay, on Do I Need a Balun, which is a very old video. Like, I'm just wondering if the same principle could be applied to 11-meter band. Again, I can't really answer questions on CB very much. Because I don't really know anything about it. Last time I used CB, I was a teenager. Let's see. I wouldn't try to end feed an 11-meter dipole and center feed it, because if you're only going to work on one band, just use a center fed dipole rather than going to the bother, expense, and trouble of end feeding that. I mean, you could, but why? Anyway, he's got some other ideas for modifying it. Hope they work for you. Let's see, this is from Glenn Martin, who's in the far west Missouri area, I think, on making the ARRL unfed half-wave. My small city lot is too small for this, but his son has a farm. You can always give it a try. I think that's why the league made this a 40 to 10 dipole, is because most yards don't have 132 feet to hang up a wire. I do, because I've got an acre here. My trees aren't very tall, though. Can't really use them for masts. So now the way I had this thing set up was the top of 20-foot pole is where the balun was. And then straight across to another 20-foot pole at the 66-foot point. And then through a loop up there and down to a tree where I tied it up so that people can walk under it. And that's what I set it up and tuned it for, and it works fine. Now on 80 and 40, that's going to be an NVIS antenna. So I don't have any taller masts. You know, I guess, wouldn't it be nice if I could put some 50-foot tall telephone poles in my backyard with pulleys on them so I could get stuff up and down? I don't think I'd send my assistant, Aiden, up on one of those. He did go on the ladder, which you saw in this video here. Donald Smith says there may be a cap that will move the frequency to cover more of the low end. Actually, just take the cap out, and it will cover the low end. The idea was to move just 80 meters up into the phone band. If you use it unmodified, on 80 meters, the one I did actually came in about 3.6 for its lowest SWR, maybe a little bit more, but you could very easily work FT8 on it. Without losing the high end. Well, you can experiment with values of capacitors. I bought a box. I got 150 capacitors for $10 from Amazon, and I just picked one kind of in the middle to see what it would do. And because of the trouble of going up, down, up, down, up, down that ladder to change things, I have not done anything to change capacitor values. Maybe what I should do is get a little board, put like 5 capacitors in a row with a little clip lead so I can select various capacitors. That'd be an interesting exercise. Joe B says that's what I'm going to try. I need the digital end and the top of the phone band for NJSP digital and phone MCON nets. Yeah, that's hard to do with one antenna, I tell you. There's got to be a way to do it. Somebody can set up some sort of reactive center on that thing with a somewhat shorter 80-meter segment, as the guy did previously in one of these comments, and can find some sort of a reactive network that will behave so that you can tune it high and then low on the band. There's got to be a way to do that. It's beyond me. But there are others out on YouTube, W2AEW, are you listening, who could do that and figure that out. So let's see. Love this antenna. So glad you're making this series. This is on the end-fed half-wave. Tube versus solid state amp comparison. How did you wire the 500 M to power supply with all the red plus leads? 500 M to the power supply with all the red plus leads. I'll have to go back and look at the video and see what I did with all the red plus leads. They're sometimes hard to connect to each other. You almost need to take a little piece of wire and just connect them all to the wire. All the red plus leads. 500M. Okay, ALS 500M is the mobile. How did I wire it with all the red plus leads? Okay, it's set up. It's a really very simple antenna or amplifier internally. It's got two sets of pass transistors for the positive wave and two for the negative wave. And so it does a Class B kind of thing back and forth. And basically, each transistor gets its own input from the power supply. It's number 10 wire that they're using, and they say that even at the length they provide, it's probably too long. It's a 75 amp power supply. The manual for the amp says that it requires 80 amps, but they only make the 75 amp power supply and say that it's perfectly matched to the ALS 500M. So there's two screw terminals on the front of the power supply for the 75 amps. So on one side I've got two screw terminals for the black. On the other side I've got one screw terminal for two black and one screw terminal for the three red. Now one of them actually has a piece of black wire in it, so it's a little confusing. But I'm not going to change it because it's too hard to change. The wires are fused and everything. The third red wire is thin, and it comes, if you short that wire to ground, it'll turn on the amplifier. Okay, so you can actually put the plug somewhere else. Now, I just use the switch that's on the front of the thing. You'll double check the schematic before you try that, but I think that is the case with that little wire that comes out. So I just have that connected around to the plus terminal on the power supply. So the power supply sits on top of the amplifier. The power supply has the power coming out the front. The amplifier wants the power to come in the back. And you've got four big, hairy, honking number 10 stranded wire things coming around through there. And yes, it works. It works just fine. With that many wires, now the wires actually go into a Jones plug, and the Jones plug plugs into the back of the amplifier. Okay, So there really are two separate 12 volt plus DC inputs, one for each side of the amplifier. So it works. And actually the cable that is used there is the one that came with the amplifier. So Dave, I used, that was from D. Webster. Mark R. Dave, I use a mobile radio for a base station. Is there any issue with case grounding DC equipment with AC equipment? DC radio, DC amp, DC audio equalizer, not in that order. DC watt and SWR meter, AC to DC power supply. They should all be grounded together. Usually the power supplies don't have a place to do that because they ground to third wire ground in the household electrical system. But you can loosen a screw in the back, connect a piece of braid in that, take that to your station single point ground. Now note, the black wire, the 12 volt coming out of the power supply, that black wire is connected straight through to the green wire ground. Okay, so if you, in addition, connect that, which you should, to the, well, you connect it to your radio, and you ground that black wire's connected to the chassis of the radio. That's where you're going to do a connection between DC, oh man, it's getting windy outside. 33 gust, 33 miles per hour. So you're going to have a DC pass through from the, not the neutral, but the third wire, green wire ground, all the way through to your station ground. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the way mine works. It's the way everybody works who sets up their grounding right. If that creates a ground loop, and you get ARF in the shack, which is your evidence of the ground loop, rearrange the wires or something. Contrary to what a very popular amateur radio operator says, do not ever defeat the third wire ground. Don't. You're setting yourself up for a bad accident, okay? If you are having RFI with that, rearrange things. I ended up having to separate my computer equipment from my ham radio equipment. Okay, computer, ham radio. The only thing connecting the two is the USB cable coming out of the ICOM 7300 and the USB cable coming out of the RSP1A from SDR Play. Okay? Let's see, Patriot 945 with the inverted V. How about having a V antenna that is horizontal? And I actually did a Ask Dave on that very subject. Let's see if I can find it quickly here. By the way, for those of you who do not get QST, you are missing my monthly column in QST called Ask Dave. Now, right down there, you see that house? The center pulls that offline. There's your horizontal V. And down below there, you see the radiation pattern, the horizontal radiation pattern. The answer is it does not affect things very much. Now, I went with the inverted V. I did various levels of moving it down like that to see what it did to the antenna, and the answer is not much. So yes, you can do a V horizontally, like an arrow pointing at something, and that will work fine. I think I did a video about it, where this guy wanted to bring the V all the way around to this shape, but horizontal. And the answer is it works fine. Just get something in the air. As you can tell by all the many different kinds of antennas, lots of things will work. Okay, and as you can tell by the fact that there are many different kinds of antennas, no one antenna is dramatically better than all the rest. Just is not that way. So Unole Agotia said, missed the live stream, but able to catch up now. Very good. Leo enjoyed my preview of the Pites Ecox power box. The Chinese vendors, I guess, must have a mailing list for sending out their power boxes. They call them DC generators. They're not. They're just batteries. But there's a lot of features on them. You can charge your phone. You can plug in something 12 volt up to about 10 amps. And then you can also get AC, and it is often you can choose between 50 and 60 hertz. This one I couldn't find anything to choose 50, so it's 60 hertz. But they will run very reactive loads. Like I take a screw shooter, which is like a drill, and just barely pull the trigger to where it's just starting, and that puts an extraordinarily inductive load on the inverter. Now, I've blown out inverters doing that before, because although they say they're sine wave, they cannot handle a large power factor. The power factor is, and this takes a little getting used to this idea, that on a wire at AC line voltage, actually any wire, this is true, the current and the voltage are not necessarily in phase with each other. So that means voltage can be pushing this way at the same time there's current going this way. And yes, that's a fact. The difference, if you take the number of degrees apart these two waves are, take the cosine of that, that gives you a number between 0 and 1. Yes, I know the cosine can go to -1, but number between 0 and 1, and it's called the power factor. Oh, I guess it can be -2 if you're doing capacitive. Positive power factor is inductive. So the thing is that there are a lot of loads like this. And where do you get a load where the current can be out of phase? From some reactive circuit. Usually in the home, it's a motor of some kind, like in a screw shooter or a drill or something like that. And those can be very reactive. And so the utility system has to be able to handle the maximum current that goes through there. If you take the current and the voltage, multiply them by each other, and then multiply it by the cosine of the angle, or the power factor, that will give you the actual power. So that means the actual power can be less than what appears to be the max power, max current. But the electrical system has to be built to handle the maximum current. So they hate a power factor other than 1, because they have to build a system that handles those peak currents. So often, not often, but as you're driving around, you will see utility poles. They've got 3 cans on them, 3 big cans, and they're not connected to anything else. Just those cans sitting up there attached to the wires. Those are capacitors. Those are capacitors measured in farads that are trying to take the lagging inductive current and create an equivalent leading current so that it's a resistive load. It saves the utility a lot in power line losses, because those go up with the current. It also saves the utility. The generators and stuff like to drive resistive loads. So, by the way, this is general class material. They don't talk about this in the technician, but it's a very fascinating little subject of radio, that the voltage times the current is not always the power. What they call voltage times the current is the voltamps. And then when you add the power factor, you can convert that to actual watts that are dissipated by the load. Which is wild. Okay. Jung Smile. I know most hams pay extra for MarsCap mod to their rigs and several HTs that are unblocked. So where's the beef, Dave? I don't think most hams pay for the MarsCap mod. For the very simple reason that it's not that many people are involved in Mars and CAP. Okay. There are a number of radios that are part 90 rather than part 97. And can you use them on ham radio? Yeah, I don't recommend it because I know that some of the Chinese radios come out that just operate on the ham bands. And that's the way it should be, in my opinion. If you can show a license or need for Mars and Cap, you can have yours modified. Fine. Do whatever you want. Now, there is a myth, and it's a bad myth, roaming around that you can use any frequency in an emergency. While that is technically true, the fact is, one, you have no training in using that frequency. You don't know what frequency you need to be using. You could be interrupting public service events, even police events, in trying to do that. And there was a ham last year over in California who was out at the airport where they were doing firefighting operations, loading the planes with the fire retardant and so on. And he thought he had some information that he thought that the people who were controlling the event should know. So he used his radio to get on their frequencies and give them this info, which really caused basically panic and confusion because they're thinking somebody's trying to jam them. And the next thing this ham knows is there's a sheriff out there armed and wanting to talk to him right now. And he got in big trouble for doing that. He tried to claim that it was an emergency. This was information that they needed to know. The authorities claimed they already knew it, and he should not be interrupting a network that he is not already a part of, is not trained to belong to, and so on. Now, a lot of these agencies have pre-existing agreements with the various emergency support agencies, okay? So if that net is activated and they need you, they'll call you and tell you, and you'll use your equipment or whatever to operate on those frequencies under the plans that you've already practiced and know what they are, and you know how to call, what the message format is, everything like that. So don't think that you can pick up a radio and broadcast on any frequency in an emergency. First of all, your emergency may not be a civil emergency. Now, it is true that if you can't get a hold of anybody and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and you crashed or something, yes, get some help. But what frequency are you going to use? Who are you going to call? If you've ever put the scanner on and scanned outside the 2-meter band on either side, you'll note that most of the time there's nothing there. So how do you know who to talk to? How have you planned it? And so on. The time to prepare for an emergency is in advance of the emergency, well in advance of the emergency. Join your local ARES or RACES or auxiliary communications or whatever it is at the county level, Okay, that's where it's organized at the county level. Become part of their operations through those programs, all right? And then you'll know what to do. And you'll be extra equipped in the event you do come across an emergency somewhere. So I would say that's a dangerous myth. It got that one ham in real trouble. What he thought was an emergency was not. The people had it under control. They were fighting the fire. And they already had the information that he was trying to give them. He would have been better to have driven to the command center and knocked on the door and says, oh, by the way, did you know your tent's on fire? You know, something like that. That is why I say stay in the ham bands, use gear that transmits in the ham bands, because you get a brand new tech may not remember that what the band plan is for 2 meters, and they end up in strange places and they can do some damage. So, Dwayne KO4VNX talks about the Pikes ECOX look like great unit for field day. Yes, it is. And I give all of these the same review. I check them on the oscilloscope for sine wave power. I want to see what the waveform does under load and under a reactive load, okay? And then I check it for noise by listening on my radio in the different ham bands, turning the thing on and off, turning the drill on and off, all this kind of stuff. I also have a heater, a little heater about this big that does 800 and 1200 watts. And that's another good load test for these things. So, Young Smile, I did my research for clean 5-watt HT and now have 6 of these. It's as good as the Yaesu FT60, which is made in China but under Japanese supervision, at 1/3 the cost. This is Redivus's best and a real sleeper because it's rebranded a TYT UV88. Also have and highly recommend the TYT 8000D or E. I did a review of the 8000E years ago. That thing has been around. And yes, they do work. They can work quite well. I think we'll take one last one here. Steve Genoway says, since I messed up and used SS guy wires, stainless steel, rather than rope, and it seems to be radiating. Yes, you can get that. I'm getting 20/9. Results on 10 meters at 1,800 miles away. Killed my other bands, but it is perfect 20 meters, so I'm not going to mess with it. And SWR is 1 across the band. Very good. Stainless steel guy wires. Yes, you can use those. If you look at the big towers that they put up for cell phone towers and stuff like that, those have got primo guying on them. And they're steel cables. They're not stainless. Stainless is not that strong. This is good, strong steel, which means that you have to take care of proper preparation so that they won't rust or do anything like that. But they are exceptionally strong. Yes, and they will end up becoming part of the antenna. Now, what you can do if you want to use the other bands is place insulators every so often down these wires. That's what people with beams do, okay, to keep the guy wires from resonating. Rope works too. Some kinds of rope stretch. So be careful to use something like parachute cord or guy wire you can get from the RF parts and places like that. Or guy rope that you can get that's black, isn't going to disintegrate in the UV, and works well, as a guy ropes, a little more expensive. I bought a big 1,000-foot roll of parachute cord for, $50, $75. I don't know, it's something on Amazon. From a company. No, I bought it directly from the company. And Augie told me it was available. I bought it, and I've been using it. So we'll see if, in fact, that is what we need. Okay, we're going to call it quits here in an hour after. I want to thank you all very much for joining for this week's Commentariat. If you'd like to support this channel, you can. Go to dcasler.com/support. Pick a way that works for you. Probably best will be Patreon. Or you can put in a one-time tip jar, or you can sign up for a, quote, subscription on PayPal, which is very much like the way you would do with Patreon, but without all the bells and whistles. So there you have it. Also, when you make a comment, you can add a couple bucks to the channel funds along with the comment if you want to. We saw one of those today. Also, if you look on your desktop, below the video, there's actually merchandise there. T-shirts and stuff like that. So, if you want. There you go. Okay, so there you have it. Until we next meet, 73.